It's a big story that we are breaking at this hour. The White House has announced that US President Joe Biden is going to be traveling to Europe to take part in a historic NATO meeting next week. This to discuss their response to Russia. It's not clear yet whether he's going to be meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky, who will virtually address the US Congress today. It's a big story we're getting at this hour, with the White House now confirming that US President Joe Biden is indeed going to be engaging with leaders of NATO countries, taking part in a meeting, and this is going to be essentially to strategize on what next as far as the NATO's response to the continuous invasion of Russia of Ukraine is concerned. Remember, 21 days, and Russia is relentless in its pursuit to take over the capital city of Kyiv and also bombard Ukraine. The shelling continues, the death and destruction in Ukraine continues. NATO countries have so far expressed solidarity with Ukraine, with the EU delegation also visiting Kyiv just yesterday. But apart from that, there have been no concrete steps vis-a-vis imposition of a no-fly zone, a request that has been made by Ukraine to NATO countries several times. US President Joe Biden is traveling to Europe to take part in a historic NATO meeting, and this is going to be held next week to discuss what exactly will be their response to Russia. The White House has just confirmed that US President Joe Biden is going to be traveling to Europe to take part in the historic NATO meeting next week to discuss their response to Russia. Our Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan is getting us more details. She joins us from Poland for more on that. Geeta, extremely important given that this really can't continue anymore. 21 days. And it's time really for NATO countries to now respond to Russia, given that the aggression has only intensified from Russia's side, isn't it? We'll just go back to Geeta in a bit from now, but this information just coming in, a big developing story. US President is going to be visiting Europe to take part in a historic NATO meeting next week to discuss the response to Russia. It's going to be a collective response of NATO countries, and that's the reason why US President Joe Biden is traveling to Europe to take part in this meeting. Also, it's not clear yet whether he's going to be meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky or not. Geeta is back with us. Geeta, an extremely important decision that has been taken, given that Russia is more aggressive in its aggression as far as the attack Ukraine is concerned, and as it is inching closer to the capital city of Kyiv.
Well, that's a very important development. White House saying that President Biden is going to be in Brussels for the big NATO meet. And if that happens, they are looking at, we also know that Jens Stoltenberg, that is the NATO chief, also is going to hold an extraordinary meeting today. So there is a forward movement in terms of how the West is looking at responding to the Russian invasion. Would that really mean military intervention? At this point in time, Sneha, that does not seem likely. But what are the other options that the NATO and the European Union, or for that matter, the West really have? We have to see what that really is going to be. But important and significant over here is that we've seen Zelensky come to Europe quite a few times to meet with the leadership here, including Poland. And we do not know where the meeting is going to take place. Is it going to be Brussels or is it going to be Poland? Will President Biden, like some reports suggest, will be visiting Eastern European nations? And if that is the case, it could very well be here in Poland. But there is a huge likelihood of a meeting between Biden, an in-person meeting between Biden and Zelensky in one of the Eastern European countries. And that comes at a time when Russian invasion continues. Kyiv has been absolutely encircled, and both sides, Zelensky and Russia, are saying there's some forward movement in the talks. So if there is forward movement in the talks, is the West also getting jittery? If the European Union is moving ahead with membership and expediting that process, is Russia getting jittery? Either way, Zelensky has to take some important decisions in the coming week. And in that, it will have to understand whether it is time to reach a deal, a negotiated deal with Russia, or have the NATO come out and expressly say that they are going to be involved militarily.
As far as Ukraine's own response is concerned, it doesn't really look like it has many options given the manner in which things have panned out, Geeta, in the last 21 days, with the Ukrainian president indicating that, look, Ukraine is not joining the US-led NATO alliance, and we are very clear about it. It obviously is a hint that Ukraine really has no options available, isn't it?
Absolutely, Sneha. But look, the statement was the other way around. He was addressing the Brits. And while speaking to the Brits in the presence of Prime Minister Boris Johnson, this was more of sarcasm, where he spoke about the open door, so-called quote-unquote open door policy of NATO, where the door is not so open, and that Ukraine and the people of Ukraine realize that there is going to be no entry of Ukraine into the NATO. And if that is not going to happen, he really spoke of the military options that they should be looking at individually as a nation with other blocs. So it is more of a letdown that he was talking about, that he feels and the people of Ukraine feel let down with the NATO not having come forward. We completely know, and we know the argument NATO keeps giving, that it would lead to escalation and it would be a war between the NATO, the West, and Russia. But at this point in time, it just seems like Ukraine a bit more than it could chew. And Zelensky now coming out and saying that there is a realization that this so-called open door policy of NATO is not that open.
Geeta, thank you so much for getting us up to speed with those developments. We'll, of course, keep coming back to you for more on that story, important story that we are talking about. US President Joe Biden all set to travel to Europe for an important NATO meeting next week.